My daughter's husband thought this old retired principal had lost his edge. He'd been sneaking through my house for weeks, photographing my documents, copying down my passwords while I supposedly napped in my recliner. But when he opened my desk drawer that Tuesday morning, expecting to find my social security card and banking information, his confident smirk turned ghost white, then beet red with rage. What he found instead would send him running from Cedar Falls forever, marked so clearly that even our small-town police couldn't miss him. And me? I just chuckled from my kitchen window, watching 35 years of dealing with sneaky teenagers finally pay off in the most spectacular way possible. Before we continue with Jim's remarkable story, if you enjoy tales about family wisdom triumphing over deception, consider subscribing to our channel. We share meaningful stories every week that celebrate the strength and intelligence of America's older generation. Now, let me tell you what really happened in my quiet Cedar Falls neighborhood. It started 3 months ago on a crisp October morning when my daughter Jennifer called, her voice strained with worry. "Dad, I hate to ask, but Tyler lost his job at the tech company. We're behind on our mortgage, and She didn't need to finish. Of course they could come stay with me. That's what family does. Tyler Johnson seemed like the perfect son-in-law when he first started dating my Jennifer 5 years ago. 36 years old, claimed to work in technology consulting, always polite and respectful when they visited my 2-story colonial on Maple Street. He'd compliment my garden, ask about my retirement from Cedar Falls High School, where I'd been principal for 35 years, and even help with yard work without being asked. But something changed the moment they moved into my guest room. Tyler's questions became more pointed, more personal. During our morning coffee, he'd casually ask about my banking habits. "Do you still go to First National in person, Jim? Most people your age prefer online banking now." When I mentioned my weekly grocery shopping routine, he'd probe deeper. "Same day every week? That's smart, staying organized." At first, I attributed his curiosity to natural concern. After all, I was 67, living alone in a house too big for one person since my wife Margaret passed 2 years ago. Maybe Tyler genuinely worried about my safety and security. Then I started noticing things, small things that most people would miss, but after 3.5 decades of catching students who thought they were smarter than the principal, my instincts were finely tuned. My mail would be slightly disturbed when I returned from my afternoon walks. Papers in my home office weren't quite where I'd left them. The drawer where I kept important documents showed tiny scratches around the lock. Tyler had also developed an interesting habit of volunteering for errands. "Let me drive you to the bank, Jim. Save you the trouble. I'll pick up your prescriptions at the pharmacy. Why don't I handle the grocery shopping this week?" Always helpful, always eager to know my routines, my schedules, my personal business. The breaking point came last Tuesday morning. I'd pretended to be napping in my living room recliner, but through half-closed eyes, I watched Tyler creep down the hallway toward my home office. He moved like a cat burglar, avoiding the creaky floorboard by the bathroom door, stepping carefully on the edges of the stairs to minimize noise. But Tyler had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated this old educator who'd spent decades staying one step ahead of teenagers convinced they could outsmart the system. That afternoon, I did what any good principal would do when dealing with a suspicious student. I started documenting everything. In my desk drawer, the same one Tyler had been so interested in, I pulled out a yellow legal pad and began making notes. Timestamps, observations, patterns. Old habits from 3 decades of writing disciplinary reports. "Tyler asked about my bank again during lunch," I wrote. "3rd time this week. Specifically wanted to know if I use online banking or go in person." I paused, tapping my pen against the paper. "Also asked about my safe deposit box. Claims he's worried about home security." The more I thought about it, the more red flags appeared. Tyler's unemployment story had holes big enough to drive a truck through. He claimed the tech company had laid him off due to budget cuts, but when I'd asked which company, his answer was vague. "Small startup," he'd said. "You probably haven't heard of it." When Jennifer mentioned his severance package, Tyler quickly changed the subject. Then there were the phone calls. Tyler received them at all hours, always stepping outside or into another room to take them. Job interviews, he'd explain when he returned, but his body language told a different story. Tense shoulders, clenched jaw, the way he'd pace afterward like a caged animal. I decided to test my theory. That evening, while Jennifer was at her book club meeting at the Cedar Falls Library, I made casual conversation with Tyler as we watched the evening news. "You know, I've been thinking about updating my will," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "Margaret and I set it up years ago, but with Jennifer married now, maybe it's time for some changes." Tyler's attention snapped from the television to me with laser focus. "That's probably smart, Jim. Estate planning is important." He leaned forward, suddenly very interested in our conversation. "Have you thought about who you'd want as your executor? Jennifer's got a lot on her plate with her social work job." "I suppose you're right," I pretended to consider this. "Maybe I should ask someone with business experience, someone who understands finances." "I'd be happy to help," Tyler offered quickly. Too quickly. "I mean, if you need someone to look over documents or explain any technical terms, I've dealt with a lot of contracts and legal paperwork in my tech consulting." There it was, the eagerness in his voice, the way he positioned himself as the helpful son-in-law ready to handle my financial affairs. But I'd seen this behavior before, in students who volunteered to help with tasks that would give them access to answer keys or grade books. "That's very kind of you," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'll keep that in mind." Later that night, after Tyler and Jennifer had gone to bed, I made another entry in my legal pad. Tyler, extremely interested in will discussion, volunteered to handle financial documents, behavior consistent with someone planning something. The next morning brought more evidence. I woke early, as was my habit, and went downstairs to start the coffee. Through the kitchen window, I saw Tyler in my backyard, talking on his phone. His voice was low, urgent, but the autumn air carried his words clearly. "I know what I owe," he was saying, "but I need more time. The old man trusts me now. I'm working on it." A pause, then, "No, she doesn't suspect anything. Jennifer thinks I'm just being helpful." My blood ran cold. I'd heard enough conversations like this during my principalship. Students making deals, covering up problems, manipulating situations. But this wasn't about cheating on a test or skipping detention. This was about my daughter's marriage, my home, my security. Tyler was planning something, and Jennifer was his unwitting accomplice. I stepped back from the window, my mind racing. 35 years of dealing with deceptive teenagers had taught me one crucial lesson: gather evidence before you act. Accusations without proof only make the guilty party more careful, more dangerous. It was time to turn the tables. If Tyler wanted to play games with this old principle, he was about to learn that some lessons come with permanent consequences. The next morning, while Tyler drove Jennifer to her job at the Cedar Falls Social Services office, I conducted my own investigation. I'd learned long ago that the best time to search for evidence was when the suspect felt secure, confident that their activities had gone unnoticed. I started with my home office, the room Tyler had been so interested in exploring. Everything looked normal at first glance. My mahogany desk still positioned at an angle to catch the morning light, my bookshelf lined with education journals and Cedar Falls High School yearbooks, my filing cabinet locked and apparently undisturbed. But 35 years of catching students in lies had taught me to look beyond the obvious. I pulled out my magnifying glass, the same one I'd used to examine forged hall passes and altered test papers. Under close inspection, the scratches around my filing cabinet lock were clearly visible. Fresh metal shavings, tiny gouges where someone had worked with lockpicks or improvised tools. My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked the cabinet. The files inside had been carefully returned to their approximate positions, but not exactly. My insurance papers were mixed with tax documents. Bank statements from 2019 were filed behind 2023 records. Someone had rifled through everything, photographed what they needed, then tried to cover their tracks. "Son of a bitch," I muttered, then immediately felt guilty for the language. Margaret had never approved of such words, even when dealing with the most frustrating parents or students. But this violation went deeper than anything I'd encountered in my professional life. This wasn't a teenager cheating on a history exam. This was a predator who'd infiltrated my family, gained my trust, and systematically invaded my privacy. I moved to my desk, running my fingers along the edges of each drawer. The bottom drawer, where I kept my most sensitive documents, Social Security information, Medicare cards, copies of my will, showed the same telltale scratches. When I opened it, my worst fears were confirmed. The manila folder containing my financial information had been disturbed. Papers were out of order, and a small piece of tape I'd placed as a security measure had been moved. Tyler hadn't just been curious about my finances, he'd been documenting them, probably photographing every account number, every balance, every piece of information an identity thief would need. My phone rang, startling me from my investigation. Jennifer's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, trying to keep my voice normal. "Dad, I'm so sorry to bother you at home, but I left my reading glasses on my nightstand. I have a client meeting in an hour, and I can't see my notes clearly without them." "Of course, honey, I'll bring them right over." "You're the best." Tyler offered to come get them, but he's meeting with a potential employer this morning. At least, I hope it goes well. We really need some good news. My jaw clenched. Tyler wasn't meeting with any employer. He was probably somewhere planning his next move, or worse, meeting with whatever criminal associates he'd mentioned in that phone call. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, I told Jennifer. As I drove through Cedar Falls' tree-lined streets toward the social services building, my mind raced with the implications of what I'd discovered. Tyler wasn't just a desperate man who'd made some bad financial decisions. He was a calculating predator who'd married my daughter to gain access to what he perceived as an easy target, a lonely widower with assets and outdated security habits. The violation felt personal in a way that surprised me. I'd dealt with theft before, had students steal from my office, had my car broken into once in the school parking lot. But this was different. Tyler had slept in my guest room, eaten at my dining table, pretended to care about my well-being while systematically cataloging my vulnerabilities. When I reached Jennifer's office, she was waiting in the lobby, her professional smile brightening when she saw me. "You're a lifesaver, Dad." She hugged me tightly, and I caught the familiar scent of her shampoo, the same brand she'd used since high school. "How are things at home? Tyler mentioned you seemed a little tired yesterday." Tyler was monitoring my behavior, reporting back to Jennifer, probably laying groundwork for some future narrative about my declining mental state. The manipulation was more sophisticated than I'd initially realized. "Just the usual aches and pains of getting older," I said carefully. "Nothing to worry about." "Well, you know Tyler and I are here if you need anything. He's actually been saying we should help you organize your important papers, maybe set up some online banking to make things easier." There it was. Tyler's endgame was becoming clearer. Convince Jennifer that her father needed help managing his affairs, position himself as the helpful son-in-law, then gain legal access to everything he'd already stolen information about. "That's very thoughtful," I replied, "but I'm pretty set in my ways." Jennifer laughed. "I know you are. Tyler says you're probably the most organized person he's ever met. He really admires that about you." Tyler admired my organization because it made his theft easier. Every document labeled, every account clearly identified, every piece of information filed exactly where a criminal would expect to find it. I kissed Jennifer's forehead and headed back to my car, my resolve hardening with each step. Tyler thought he was dealing with a naive old man who'd never suspect family betrayal. He was about to learn that this particular old man had spent decades staying one step ahead of people who underestimated him. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind churning through everything I'd discovered. The scratched locks, the disturbed files, the systematic violation of my privacy. Every creak of the old house made me tense, wondering if Tyler was making another midnight exploration of my belongings. At 11:43 p.m., according to my bedside clock, I heard the soft sound of footsteps on the stairs. Not Jennifer's light step, something heavier, more deliberate. Tyler was moving through my house in the darkness, probably thinking I was fast asleep like any normal 67-year-old man. I eased myself out of bed, careful not to let the mattress creak, and moved to my bedroom door. Through the crack, I could see a faint glow from downstairs, probably Tyler's phone screen. The footsteps moved toward the kitchen, then toward the back door. My house had been built in 1987, and like many homes of that era, it had quirks. One of those quirks was the heating vent system that connected my bedroom to the kitchen below. On quiet nights, sounds traveled through those old ducts in unexpected ways. Margaret and I had discovered this years ago when we could hear our teenage Jennifer talking on the phone downstairs. Tonight, that architectural flaw would serve me well. I positioned myself near the heating vent and waited. Within minutes, Tyler's voice drifted up clearly through the ductwork. He was trying to whisper, but the metal channels amplified his words perfectly. "Yeah, it's me. Everyone's asleep." A pause, then, "I'm telling you, this old guy is sitting on a gold mine. I've been through all his files, bank statements, investment accounts, social security information, everything we need." My blood turned to ice. Tyler wasn't just stealing from me. He had accomplices. This wasn't desperation or poor judgment. This was organized crime. "The daughter doesn't suspect anything," Tyler continued. "Jennifer thinks I'm just being helpful, asking about her dad's finances because I'm concerned about his security. She's actually encouraging me to help him organize his important papers." I gripped the edge of the heating vent, fighting the urge to storm downstairs and confront him immediately. But 35 years of dealing with disciplinary issues had taught me the value of gathering complete information before acting. "Tomorrow night's perfect," Tyler was saying. "Jennifer has her church committee meeting every Wednesday evening. She'll be gone from 7 to 9:30, discussing the Thanksgiving food drive. Gives us a solid window." Church committee. Jennifer had mentioned it at dinner, asking if I wanted to contribute canned goods for the annual Thanksgiving drive. I'd been proud of my daughter's community involvement, never imagining it would be used as cover for a crime against her own father. I already know where he keeps everything important. There's a small safe in his bedroom closet. Old model, probably from the 1990s. I've seen him access it twice when he thought nobody was watching. Plus, I found backup keys taped under his desk drawer. The violation felt even deeper now. Tyler hadn't just rifled through my files. He'd been watching me, studying my habits, cataloging my security measures like a predator stalking prey. "Look, I know you're worried about the timeline." Tyler's voice grew more urgent. "But my crypto losses aren't going away, and those guys I borrowed from aren't exactly patient. We're talking about serious people here, the kind who break kneecaps first and ask questions later." Cryptocurrency. That explained Tyler's mysterious tech consulting work and his sudden financial crisis. He'd probably gambled away money that wasn't his, borrowed from dangerous people, and now saw my life savings as his salvation. The beauty of this setup is that even if the old man figures out something's missing, Jennifer will convince him he just misplaced it. You know how families get about aging parents. They assume memory problems, confusion, maybe early dementia. I've already been laying groundwork about Jim seeming tired and forgetful lately. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. Tyler wasn't just planning to rob me. He was preparing to gaslight my own daughter into believing I was losing my mental faculties. Any complaints I made about missing money or violated privacy would be dismissed as the confused ramblings of an elderly man whose mind was slipping. Trust me, by Friday morning, we'll be clear. I'll tell Jennifer we got a job offer in another state, something urgent that requires immediate relocation. We'll be 3 states away before anyone realizes what happened. Tyler was planning to disappear with my daughter, dragging her into his criminal world whether she knew it or not. Jennifer would wake up Friday morning married to a thief, probably accessory to crimes she never knew were committed. Yeah, well, maybe the old fool should have been more careful about who he let into his house, Tyler said with a laugh that made my skin crawl. Life lesson, right? The call ended. I heard Tyler moving around downstairs for another minute, probably checking doors and windows, then his footsteps on the stairs. I quickly moved back to my bed, controlling my breathing, pretending to be the helpless old man he thought he was robbing. Through my barely open door, I watched Tyler's shadow pass in the hallway. The guest room door opened and closed softly. For a long time after that, I lay in the darkness, processing what I'd learned. Tyler had gambling debts to dangerous people. He had an accomplice. He planned to rob me tomorrow night during Jennifer's church meeting.
And he intended to disappear immediately afterward, taking my daughter with him into whatever criminal mess he'd created. But Tyler had made one critical error in his calculations. He'd assumed I was just another confused senior citizen, grateful for company and easy to fool. He had no idea that I'd spent 35 years staying one step ahead of people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. Tyler wanted to play games with this old principal, fine, but he was about to learn that some lessons come with permanent consequences. The next morning, I woke with the clarity that comes from having a concrete plan. 35 years of dealing with scheming teenagers had taught me one fundamental truth. The best way to catch someone in the act is to let them think they're succeeding right up until the moment they fail spectacularly. While Tyler drove Jennifer to work, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my yellow legal pad, sketching out what I privately called Operation Lesson Plan. Every good educator knows that the most effective punishments are the ones that teach lasting consequences. Tyler expected to find a helpless old man tonight. Instead, he'd encounter a retired principal who'd spent decades staying one step ahead of people who underestimated authority figures. First, I needed supplies. At 67, I wasn't about to engage in any physical confrontation with a desperate man 30 years younger. This called for intelligence, not strength. I remembered reading about paint bombs used by banks to mark robbery suspects. Permanent, visible, impossible to remove quickly. The Cedar Falls hardware store had everything I needed. Bob Martinez, the owner, had been selling me gardening supplies for 15 years and didn't question my unusual shopping list. A small motion-activated device, typically used for pest control, several packets of washable but highly pigmented paint powder, and a compact digital camera with night vision capabilities.
"Working on any interesting projects, Jim?" Bob asked as he rang up my purchases. "Just some home security improvements," I replied truthfully. "You know how it is. Can't be too careful these days." Back home, I spent the afternoon in my basement workshop, carefully modifying the motion sensor. The device was designed to trigger when small animals approached bird feeders, but with some adjustments, it would activate when someone opened my bedroom dresser drawer and reached toward the back where Tyler expected to find backup keys. The paint powder would create a cloud of bright orange pigment, washable from furniture and walls, but designed to stain clothing and skin for days. Tyler would be marked as clearly as any bank robber, impossible to miss or deny. The camera placement required more thought. I tested several positions using the smartphone app I downloaded, finally settling on a spot behind my bedroom lamp where it would capture both the dresser and the center of the room. The night vision function would record everything in perfect clarity, even in complete darkness. By 4 o'clock, everything was ready. The motion sensor sat innocently in my dresser drawer, camouflaged among old photographs and miscellaneous items. The camera was positioned and activated. The trap was set. Now came the performance aspect. Tyler needed to believe I was completely unaware of his plans, just another trusting grandfather going about his normal routine. When he returned with Jennifer that evening, I greeted them warmly. "How was your day, sweetheart?" I asked Jennifer, kissing her cheek. "Busy, but good. We're finalizing the Thanksgiving food drive arrangements for tomorrow night's committee meeting." "That's wonderful. You know how proud I am of your community involvement." Tyler smiled that practiced smile I'd learned to recognize. Jennifer's lucky to have such a supportive father.
Not everyone her age has family who encourages their civic responsibilities. The irony was breathtaking. Tyler was complimenting my support of the very activity he planned to use as cover for robbing me. "I'll probably turn in early tonight," I announced during dinner. "All this excitement about your job prospects has me more tired than usual." I looked directly at Tyler. "I'm sure something good will come through soon." "I hope so," Tyler replied. "I have a really good feeling about tomorrow." He certainly did. By tomorrow, Tyler expected to be counting my money and planning his escape. Instead, he'd be explaining to the Cedar Falls Police Department why he was covered in orange paint while rifling through an elderly man's bedroom at midnight. After dinner, I made a show of taking my evening medication and heading upstairs early. "Don't stay up too late, you two," I called down. "Big day tomorrow." Indeed it was. Tyler had no idea he was about to receive the most memorable lesson of his life. Wednesday evening arrived with the kind of crisp November air that made Cedar Falls feel like a Norman Rockwell painting. Jennifer bundled up in her wool coat, gathering her purse and committee notes. "The church meeting should wrap up by 9:30, she told Tyler, kissing his cheek. "Don't let Dad stay up too late watching his history documentaries." "I'll make sure he gets his rest," Tyler replied, and I caught the double meaning in his words. He planned to ensure I was sleeping deeply when he made his move. "Drive carefully, sweetheart," I called from my recliner, playing the role of the drowsy grandfather. "Those roads get slick after dark." After Jennifer's car pulled out of the driveway, Tyler and I settled into what he probably thought would be our final evening together as trusting family members. I made a show of nodding off during the evening news, letting my head droop forward convincingly. "Jim," Tyler said softly. "You okay there?" I jerked awake with theatrical confusion. "Oh, sorry. These evening medications make me drowsier than I expected." I rubbed my eyes. "I think I'll head up to bed early tonight." "That sounds like a good idea. You need your rest." "Don't stay up too late yourself," I said, struggling to my feet with exaggerated effort. "Big day tomorrow with your job interviews." Tyler's smile was predatory. "Yeah, I have a really good feeling about tomorrow's opportunities." Upstairs, I went through my normal bedtime routine loudly enough for Tyler to hear, running water, brushing teeth, the old floorboard creaking as I moved around my bedroom. Then I turned off the lights and waited. Through my smartphone, I could monitor the camera feed in real time. The motion sensor was armed and ready. Everything hinged on Tyler following the pattern I'd observed, waiting until he was certain I was deeply asleep, then making his move. At 10:47 p.m., I heard the first soft footstep on the stairs. Tyler was coming. I controlled my breathing, keeping it deep and regular, the picture of an elderly man in medication-induced sleep. The bedroom door handle turned with glacial slowness. Tyler's silhouette appeared in the doorway, backlit by the faint hallway nightlight. He stood motionless for nearly 2 minutes, watching my supposedly unconscious form. I'd learned this patience during countless faculty meetings, the ability to remain perfectly still while observing everything around me. Satisfied that I was deeply sedated, Tyler moved into my room with the confidence of a man who believed he'd planned the perfect crime. His phone's flashlight created a narrow beam as he approached my dresser, exactly as I'd predicted. Through barely opened eyes, I watched him position himself in front of the dresser. His movements were practiced, efficient. This wasn't his first burglary. Tyler had probably been refining these skills for months, maybe years. The dresser drawer slid open smoothly. Tyler's flashlight beam swept across the contents, and I saw his posture shift with anticipation. He'd found what he was looking for, or thought he had. His hand reached confidently toward the back of the drawer, fingers seeking the backup keys he'd spotted during his previous searches. This was the moment 35 years of educational psychology had prepared me for, the instant when overconfidence meets consequence.
Tyler's fingers closed around the decoy keys I'd planted. The motion sensor detected his reach, and my carefully calibrated trap sprung with perfect timing. Whoosh! The paint bomb exploded in a brilliant cloud of orange pigment, coating Tyler from head to chest in washable but highly visible dye. The sound echoed through the house like a small cannon firing. What the hell? Tyler stumbled backward, cursing violently as orange paint settled in his hair, on his clothes, across his shocked face. He looked like he'd been attacked by a craft store explosion. I sat up in bed with Academy Award-worthy confusion, reaching for my bedside lamp. What on earth was that noise? Light flooded the room, revealing Tyler in all his orange-stained glory. He stood frozen beside my dresser, holding my decoy keys, covered head to toe in paint that would mark him for days. "Tyler?" I blinked with theatrical bewilderment. "What are you doing in my bedroom? And why are you sparkling?" The camera had captured everything in perfect high-definition detail. Tyler had been caught red-handed, or rather orange-handed, in the act of breaking into my private belongings. Justice, it turns out, came in very bright colors. Tyler opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. Orange paint dripped from his hair onto my bedroom carpet, creating a trail of evidence that would be impossible to explain away. "There was some kind of booby trap," he stammered, brushing frantically at the paint coating his clothes. "I heard a noise and came to check on you, and something exploded in your drawer." "A booby trap? In my bedroom furniture? That seems unlikely, don't you think?" I gestured at the decoy keys still clutched in his orange-stained fingers. "And what are those you're holding?" Tyler looked down at his hands as if seeing the keys for the first time. I found these on the floor. They must have fallen when the trap went off." "Fallen from where, exactly?" I asked mildly. "Because those keys were taped inside my dresser drawer, the same drawer you're standing next to with your hands still inside it." From down the hall came the sound of feet hitting the floor. Jennifer, awakened by the paint bomb's explosion, was coming to investigate. Tyler's eyes widened with panic as he realized his situation was about to get much worse. "Jim, please," he whispered desperately, "let me explain. I can pay you back. I just need some time." "Pay me back for what?" I asked. "I haven't lost anything yet. Though I'm curious, pay me back with what money? I thought you were unemployed." "Dad, what's happening?" Jennifer's voice carried worry and growing alertness as her footsteps approached down the hallway. "I heard some kind of explosion." Tyler looked trapped, cornered by his own greed and stupidity. Orange paint continued to settle on my carpet like festive snow, marking his guilt with permanent visibility. "Please," he whispered again, "Jennifer doesn't need to know about this. I'll leave tonight. I'll disappear. Just don't tell her." "Tell her what?" I asked innocently. "That her husband was rifling through my private belongings at midnight? That he triggered a security device while trying to steal my backup keys? Or should I not mention the phone conversation I overheard last night about your cryptocurrency gambling debts and your plan to rob me during tonight's church committee meeting?" Tyler's face went white beneath the orange paint. "You heard that?" "Every word, including the part about your dangerous creditors and your plan to convince Jennifer I was developing dementia to cover your theft." "Dad, are you okay?" Jennifer appeared in the doorway, tying a robe belt with quick, worried movements. Then she stopped dead, taking in the impossible scene before her. Me, sitting up in bed in my pajamas, looking concerned but alert. Tyler, standing beside my open dresser drawer, covered head to toe in bright orange paint like he'd been dipped in a construction cone. Paint still drifting through the air like toxic confetti. "What in the world?" Jennifer's voice caught between confusion and growing alarm. "Tyler, why are you covered in paint? Why are you in Dad's bedroom?" Tyler's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. No amount of charm or manipulation could explain away his current appearance or location. "There was a noise," he said weakly, the same explanation he'd tried on me. "I came to check on your father, and some kind of security device went off." Jennifer's eyes moved from Tyler to me, then to the open dresser drawer, then to the keys in Tyler's paint-stained hands. I watched my daughter's expression change as she began processing the evidence before her. "Security device?" she repeated slowly. "In Dad's bedroom furniture? And you just happened to be checking on him at," she glanced at my bedside clock, "11:15 at night while holding keys that belong in his drawer?" The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler had run out of believable lies, and Jennifer was too intelligent to accept the unbelievable ones. Sometimes the truth reveals itself in living color. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, keeping my movements calm and deliberate.
"Jennifer, sweetheart, there's something you need to hear. Something I recorded last night." "Dad, what are you talking about?" Jennifer looked between Tyler and me, confusion creasing her brow. "Recorded what?" "Don't," Tyler said quickly, his voice edged with panic. "Jim, please don't do this to her." "Do what to me?" Jennifer's voice rose slightly. "Tyler, what is he talking about? What recording?" I found the audio file on my phone and held it up. Last night, around midnight, Tyler made a phone call. He thought I was asleep, but sound travels through the old heating vents in this house. I recorded everything. Tyler's orange-stained face went pale. "Jennifer, whatever you're about to hear, I can explain. I was desperate. I made mistakes, but I love you." "What mistakes?" Jennifer's voice was sharp now, protective instincts kicking in as she sensed the depth of deception she was about to uncover. I pressed play. Tyler's voice filled the room, clear and damning. "I'm telling you, this old guy is sitting on a gold mine. I've been through all his files, bank statements, investment accounts, social security information, everything we need." Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth. She stared at Tyler like she was seeing a stranger. The recording continued. "The daughter doesn't suspect anything. Jennifer thinks I'm just being helpful, asking about her dad's finances because I'm concerned about his security. She's actually encouraging me to help him organize his important papers." "Oh my God," Jennifer whispered. "Tyler, how could you?" "Tomorrow night's perfect," Tyler's voice continued from the phone. "Jennifer has her church committee meeting every Wednesday evening. She'll be gone from 7 to 9:30, discussing the Thanksgiving food drive. Gives us a solid window." Jennifer sank against the doorframe, her face crumbling as she realized her husband had been using her community involvement as cover for planning a crime against her father.
"I already know where he keeps everything important," the recording played on. "There's a small safe in his bedroom closet, old model, probably from the 1990s. I've seen him access it twice when he thought nobody was watching." "You've been watching my father?" Jennifer's voice broke. "Studying him like prey?" Tyler tried to step toward her, but she backed away. Orange paint fell from his clothes with each movement, leaving a trail of guilt across my bedroom floor. "My crypto losses aren't going away, and those guys I borrowed from aren't exactly patient. We're talking about serious people here, the kind who break kneecaps first and ask questions later." "Gambling debts?" Jennifer whispered. "What gambling debts? You told me you lost your job because of company layoffs." The recording delivered the final blow. "The beauty of this setup is that even if the old man figures out something's missing, Jennifer will convince him he just misplaced it. You know how families get about aging parents. They assume memory problems, confusion, maybe early dementia." Jennifer made a sound like she'd been physically struck. "You were going to make me think Dad was losing his mind? You were going to use me to cover up stealing from him?" "Trust me, by Friday morning we'll be clear. I'll tell Jennifer we got a job offer in another state, something urgent that requires immediate relocation. We'll be 3 states away before anyone realizes what happened." I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer stared at Tyler, tears streaming down her face. "You were going to kidnap me? Take me away from my father after robbing him, and I would never have known the truth?" "Jennifer, please," Tyler began, but she cut him off. "Get out," she said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my father's house, now." Her voice grew stronger. "Get out before I call the Cedar Falls Police Department and have you arrested for attempted burglary." Tyler looked between us, realizing his con was completely blown. No more manipulation, no more lies, no more playing the victim. The orange paint had marked him as clearly as his own recorded words had condemned him. Tyler stood there for another 10 seconds, orange paint still dripping from his hair like evidence of his shame. Then something in Jennifer's expression, pure protective fury mixed with heartbreak, finally convinced him that his marriage was over. "This isn't finished," he said, his voice turning ugly as desperation gave way to anger. "Half of everything we own is legally mine. I'll get my share." "You mean half of our debt," Jennifer's voice was ice cold. "Because that's all we have, Tyler. Debt. Gambling debt that I knew nothing about until tonight. I'll fight you in court." "With what money?" Jennifer stepped closer to him, and I was proud to see she wasn't backing down. "You just admitted you owe dangerous people money you don't have. What exactly are you going to fight me with?" Tyler's bravado crumbled. He looked at me with something approaching hatred. "This is your fault, old man. You turned her against me." "No," Jennifer said firmly. "You did that yourself. When you decided to plan a robbery instead of asking for help. When you called my father names behind his back. When you lied to me for months about everything." Tyler tried one last desperate approach. "Jennifer, we're married. We took vows, for better or worse, remember? You broke those vows when you planned to commit a felony against my family." Jennifer pointed toward the door. "Get your things and get out, now." I watched Tyler realize that his con was truly over. No more manipulation, no more lies, no more playing the victim. Jennifer had heard his own words condemn him, had seen him caught red-handed in my bedroom at midnight. He left without another word, tracking orange paint through my house like a trail of evidence. We could hear him in the guest room, throwing clothes into bags with bitter violence, cursing under his breath as paint transferred from his skin to everything he touched. Jennifer sank into my bedside chair, looking exhausted and heartbroken. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I brought him into your home. I put you in danger." "Sweetheart, you couldn't have known." I reached over and took her paint-free hand. "Tyler is a skilled manipulator. He fooled both of us initially." "But you figured it out. How long have you known?" "Since Tuesday night, when I overheard that first phone call. I've been gathering evidence ever since." Jennifer managed a weak smile through her tears. "The paint bomb was genius. Very educational. 35 years of dealing with sneaky teenagers finally paid off." I squeezed her hand. "I wanted him caught in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away." Tyler reappeared in the doorway with 2 hastily packed bags, still sparkling like a defeated Christmas ornament. Orange paint clung to his hair, his clothes, his skin. It would take days to wash off completely. "Jennifer," he started one final time. "Leave your house key on the kitchen counter," she said without looking at him. "Don't contact me. My lawyer will contact yours." Tyler opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to realize the futility. He walked away, and a minute later we heard the front door slam. Jennifer and I sat in silence for a few moments, listening to Tyler's car start and drive away into the Cedar Falls night. "Can I stay here?" Jennifer asked quietly. "Just until I figure things out?" Sweetheart, this is your home for as long as you want it. I looked around at my paint-splattered bedroom, though we might need to do some redecorating. That earned me a genuine laugh, even through her tears. I love you, Dad. I love you too. And Jennifer?
You're going to be fine. We both are. Outside, Tyler's taillights disappeared around the corner, taking his orange-stained deception with him into the darkness. 3 weeks later, I was making coffee when Jennifer came downstairs, dressed for her job at Cedar Falls Social Services. The morning routine we'd established felt natural, comfortable, like she'd never left home in the first place. "Morning, Dad." She kissed my cheek and poured herself a cup. "Sleep well?" "Like a baby. No mysterious midnight visitors trying to rob me," I smiled. "It's amazing how peaceful the house feels now." Jennifer settled at the kitchen table, the same spot where Tyler used to sit and probe for information about my finances. Now it was just my daughter, reading the Cedar Falls Gazette and planning her day. "The divorce papers should be finalized next week," she said, not looking up from the newspaper. "Tyler's lawyer finally stopped trying to claim half of your assets. Hard to argue property division when your client is facing potential criminal charges." Speaking of which, Detective Morrison called yesterday. Tyler's accomplice, the one from the phone recording, turned out to be his cousin from Des Moines. They've been running this scam on elderly people across Iowa for months. I paused with my coffee cup halfway to my lips. Other victims? At least 6 that they know of. Apparently, Tyler's pattern was to marry into families, gain trust, then systematically rob the older relatives. The orange paint evidence was what broke the case wide open. The thought of other families experiencing what we'd gone through made my chest tighten. Are they recovering the money? Some of it. Tyler had already lost most of his victims' savings in cryptocurrency trading, but the FBI traced enough transactions to build a solid case. Jennifer finally looked up from the paper.
Detective Morrison said our evidence, the recording, the camera footage, the paint bomb, was the key to everything. I felt a quiet satisfaction. Tyler hadn't just failed to rob me, he'd been exposed as a serial predator who'd been victimizing elderly people across the state. "The library called," Jennifer continued. "They want to know if you'd be interested in teaching a senior safety workshop. Apparently word got around about your innovative home security methods." I chuckled. "Mrs. Henderson has been asking me for tips ever since she heard about the paint bomb. She wants to booby-trap her garden shed against raccoons." "You could probably patent that technique, the Harrison Home Defense System." I prefer to think of it as applied educational psychology. Same principles I used with troublemaking students, just with more colorful consequences. Jennifer laughed, the first genuinely happy sound I'd heard from her since that terrible night. "I love having you as my dad. You know that, right?" "I love having you as my daughter. Always have, always will." She glanced around our kitchen, taking in the familiar surroundings. "Is it okay if I stay a while longer? I know I'm 34 years old and probably should have my own place by now, but—" "Jennifer," I interrupted gently, "this is your home. It always has been. Stay as long as you want. Even if I decide to get a cat? Even if you decide to get 3 cats." She grinned. "Don't tempt me." Outside our kitchen window, Cedar Falls was waking up to another peaceful November morning. Mrs. Henderson was walking her dog. The mail truck was making its rounds. Everything looked normal, safe, exactly as it should be. My phone buzzed with a text message. Jennifer glanced at the screen and raised an eyebrow. "Dad, why is the Cedar Falls Police Department asking if you'd be willing to consult on other cases involving financial fraud against seniors?" I set down my coffee cup and smiled. Well, it seems this old principal might have one more career ahead of him. Sometimes life gives you unexpected second acts, and sometimes those second acts involve helping other people avoid orange-painted disasters. The Cedar Falls Community Center had never hosted a standing room-only crowd for a senior safety workshop, but that Thursday evening, every seat was filled. Word had spread quickly through our small town about the retired principal who'd outsmarted a con artist with nothing more than paint powder and 35 years of dealing with sneaky teenagers. I stood at the front of the room, looking out at faces I'd known for decades. Mrs. Henderson sat in the front row, taking notes like an eager student. Bob Martinez from the hardware store had brought his elderly mother. Even Mayor Patricia Collins had shown up, claiming she wanted to learn about innovative community safety initiatives. The most important thing to remember, I told the assembled group, is that criminals count on us being polite, trusting, and embarrassed to ask questions. They exploit our good manners. An elderly man named Frank raised his hand. But how do you tell the difference between someone genuinely trying to help and someone with bad intentions? Great question, Frank. In my case, Tyler asked too many specific questions too quickly. He wanted to know my banking habits, my daily routines, where I kept important documents. Helpful family members offer assistance. Predators gather intelligence. Margaret Sullivan, who'd taught kindergarten for 40 years, spoke up. What about the technology aspect? My grandson is always trying to help me with my computer, but some of these scammers use technology too. Technology can be a tool for both protection and exploitation, I replied. The camera system I used to catch Tyler cost less than $50 and connected to my smartphone.
But the same technology that helped me could be used against us if we're not careful about who we trust with our passwords and personal information. Detective Morrison, who'd been sitting quietly in the back, stepped forward. Mr. Harrison's case broke open an entire fraud ring operating across Iowa. His evidence helped us arrest 6 people and recover over $200,000 stolen from elderly victims. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd. I felt a flush of pride, not for catching Tyler, but for helping protect other families from experiencing what Jennifer and I had gone through. The paint bomb technique was brilliant, Detective Morrison continued, but the real key was Mr. Harrison's methodical approach. He documented everything, gathered evidence, and most importantly, he trusted his instincts when something felt wrong. After the formal presentation, people lingered to ask individual questions. Mrs. Henderson wanted advice about her neighbor's son who'd been asking to help manage her finances. Bob Martinez's mother was concerned about phone calls claiming she'd won prizes. Each story reminded me why this work mattered. Jennifer appeared at my elbow as the crowd began to thin. "Dad, there's someone here who wants to meet you." She introduced me to Dorothy Chen, a social worker from the state's Elder Protection Services. "Mr. Harrison, we've been following your case. Would you be interested in consulting with our department? We could use someone with your investigative background and teaching experience." What would that involve? Training workshops, case consultation, maybe helping us develop new protocols for identifying financial abuse. The Tyler Johnson case showed us we need better ways to catch these predators before they can victimize multiple families. I looked around the community center at all these people who'd come to learn how to protect themselves and their families. 3 months ago, I'd been a retired principal living quietly in Cedar Falls. Tonight, I was being offered a chance to turn my worst experience into something that could help others. "When do we start?" I asked. Jennifer squeezed my arm. "I'm proud of you, Dad." "I'm proud of us both, sweetheart. We survived Tyler's con, and now we're helping make sure other families don't have to go through what we did. Sometimes the best revenge is making sure the bad guys can never hurt anyone else the same way again." Thanksgiving morning arrived with the kind of crisp November weather that made Cedar Falls look like a postcard. I stood in my kitchen, watching Jennifer prepare the green bean casserole that had been her mother's specialty, and marveled at how much our lives had changed in just 6 weeks. "Remember last year?" Jennifer asked, not looking up from her mixing bowl. "Tyler complained that your turkey was too dry, and I actually apologized for your cooking." "I remember. I was seasoning the bird, following Margaret's recipe that I'd memorized after 43 years of marriage. You were trying to keep peace in the family. I was enabling his criticism of you." Jennifer's voice carried a note of regret. "He was already working to undermine your confidence, wasn't he? Setting up the narrative that you were getting forgetful, unreliable." "Probably, but you were being a good wife, trying to support your husband. There's no shame in that." Jennifer set down her mixing spoon and looked at me directly.
Dad, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Did you ever suspect that Tyler might be dangerous? Not just a thief, but actually dangerous? I considered her question carefully. There were moments when I saw something cold in his eyes, especially when he thought no one was watching. But dangerous? I thought he was desperate and calculating, not violent. Detective Morrison told me that Tyler's cousin, his accomplice, had a history of assault charges. They think if your trap hadn't worked, if Tyler had successfully robbed you that night, they might have escalated to more serious crimes. The thought sent a chill through me. Thank God for old heating vents and paint bombs then. Thank God for a father who's smarter than the criminals think he is. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. The kitchen smelled like sage and butter, familiar scents that had filled this house every Thanksgiving for decades. But this year felt different, not just because Tyler was gone, but because Jennifer and I had been through something that had fundamentally changed our relationship. I invited Mrs. Henderson for dinner, I announced. She's been alone since Harold passed last spring, and I thought she might enjoy some company. That's perfect. She can tell us more about her raccoon problems, Jennifer grinned. I still can't believe she wants to booby-trap her garden shed. She's 83 years old and tired of having her birdseed stolen. I respect her determination. The doorbell rang at exactly noon. Mrs. Henderson stood on my front porch, holding a pumpkin pie and wearing her best dress, the one she'd worn to church every Sunday for the past 5 years. "Happy Thanksgiving, Jim, Jennifer." She hugged us both warmly. "I brought dessert, and I have some questions about motion sensors." Over dinner, Mrs. Henderson regaled us with stories about her ongoing war with the neighborhood wildlife. Jennifer shared updates about her work at social services. I talked about my new consulting role with Elder Protection Services. "It's funny," Mrs. Henderson said over coffee and pie. 6 weeks ago, we were all just living our quiet lives in Cedar Falls. Now Jim's famous for catching criminals with paint bombs. Jennifer's the strongest woman I know for how she handled that terrible situation, and I'm planning to become a suburban guerrilla fighter against raccoons. Life has a way of surprising us, Jennifer agreed. Sometimes awful things happen that turn out to lead us exactly where we need to be. I looked around my dining room table, at my daughter, who'd found strength she didn't know she had, at Mrs. Henderson, who'd found purpose in protecting her property, at myself, discovering that retirement could include a whole new career helping others. "You know what I'm most grateful for this year?" I said. "Not just that we caught Tyler, but that we learned we're stronger than we thought we were." Jennifer raised her coffee cup. "To being underestimated. To proving people wrong," Mrs. Henderson added. "To paint bombs and second chances," I concluded. We clinked our cups together. 3 Cedar Falls residents who'd learned that sometimes the best defense is a good offense, and that family, whether biological or chosen, is worth protecting at any cost. By December, my consulting work with Elder Protection Services had evolved into something I'd never expected. What started as occasional case reviews had become a full-time mission to help families across Iowa recognize and prevent financial fraud targeting seniors. "Jim, we've got another one," Detective Morrison said over the phone one snowy Tuesday morning. "Family in Waterloo. Elderly widower, recently remarried to a woman 30 years younger. She's been asking a lot of questions about his assets, and his adult children are suspicious." "Same pattern as Tyler?" "Very similar. The new wife is pushing for joint bank accounts, wants to help organize his important documents, and she's been discouraging contact with his children. They're worried but don't want to seem unwelcoming to their father's new happiness." I grabbed my notebook, the same yellow legal pad I'd used to document Tyler's suspicious behavior. "I'll drive up this afternoon. What's the family's name?" "Peterson, Robert Peterson, age 71, married his wife Linda 6 months ago. They met through an online dating service." 3 hours later, I sat in the Peterson family living room in Waterloo, looking at a situation that felt uncomfortably familiar.
Robert Peterson was a kind-faced man with the slightly confused expression of someone whose world had been turned upside down by unexpected romance. His daughter Sarah and son Michael flanked him on the couch like protective bookends. "Dad's been different since he married Linda," Sarah explained, "more secretive, defensive when we ask questions about their finances." "She's very attentive," Michael added carefully, "always asking about Dad's daily routine, his medical appointments, his banking habits." Robert shifted uncomfortably. "Linda's just trying to be helpful. She wants to make sure I'm taking care of myself properly." I'd heard those exact words from Jennifer about Tyler months ago. "Mr. Peterson, has Linda suggested any changes to your financial arrangements?" "Well, she thinks I should add her to my bank accounts for convenience, in case something happens to me, you know. She says it would make things easier for everyone." "And she's offered to help organize your important papers?" Robert nodded. "She's very organized, much better with paperwork than I am." I spent the next 2 hours walking the Peterson family through the warning signs I'd learned to recognize: the excessive interest in daily routines, the push for financial access, the subtle isolation from family members, the positioning as the helpful, caring spouse who just wanted to make life easier. The key, I told them, is documentation. If Linda is legitimate, she'll have no problem with transparency. If she's running a con, she'll resist any attempts to verify her background or limit her access to your father's assets. Sarah took notes as I outlined the steps they should take: background check on Linda, separate meetings with a financial advisor, a family discussion about estate planning that included all parties. "What if we're wrong?" Michael asked. "What if Linda really does love Dad and we're just being paranoid?" "Then you'll have peace of mind and a stronger family relationship built on transparency," I replied. "But if you're right, you'll save your father from financial ruin and emotional devastation." 2 weeks later, Detective Morrison called with an update. Linda Peterson had disappeared the day after the family requested a background check. Turns out she'd been married to 4 different elderly men in 3 states over the past 5 years, each time vanishing once she'd gained access to their finances. "The Peterson family wants to thank you personally," Detective Morrison said. "You saved Robert from losing his life savings." That evening, I sat in my kitchen with Jennifer, reviewing case files that had become my new normal. Each folder represented a family that had been targeted, a senior citizen who'd been viewed as an easy mark by someone they trusted. "How many cases are you working on now?" Jennifer asked, looking over my shoulder at the stack of files. 12 active investigations, and Dorothy Chen says there are at least 20 more families requesting consultations. I closed the Peterson file and looked at my daughter. I never imagined retirement would be busier than my teaching career. "Are you happy with this work?" I considered her question. 6 months ago, I'd been a lonely widower whose biggest excitement was grocery shopping and watching history documentaries. Now I was helping protect vulnerable people from predators who saw their trust and kindness as weaknesses to exploit. "I'm making a difference," I said finally. "Tyler tried to destroy our family, but instead he showed me a way to help protect other families. There's something satisfying about turning his crime into our mission." Jennifer smiled and squeezed my shoulder. "Mom would be proud of both of us." Outside, snow was falling on Cedar Falls, covering our quiet neighborhood in peaceful white. But inside our warm kitchen, surrounded by case files and evidence of lives saved, I felt more purposeful than I had in years. The letter from the Federal Bureau of Investigation arrived on a cold January morning, bearing the official seal that made my hands shake slightly as I opened it. Jennifer looked up from her breakfast, noting my expression. "Good news or bad news, Dad?" I read the letter twice before answering. "The FBI wants me to testify before a Senate subcommittee on elder fraud. They're using our case, Tyler's case, as a primary example in new federal legislation." "You're going to Washington?" "Apparently. Senator Margaret Walsh is chairing a committee on financial crimes against seniors. They want me to explain how the paint bomb technique led to breaking up Tyler's fraud ring." Jennifer grinned. "My dad, the expert witness. Mom would have been so proud."
3 weeks later, I found myself in a wood-paneled committee room in the Hart Senate office building, facing a panel of senators and a gallery filled with advocates, law enforcement officials, and families who'd been victimized by elder fraud schemes. "Mr. Harrison," Senator Walsh began, "your case has become something of a legend in law enforcement circles. Can you walk us through how a retired high school principal outsmarted a criminal organization that had been operating successfully across multiple states?" I adjusted my microphone and looked out at the faces in the gallery. Some were familiar. Detective Morrison had flown in from Iowa. Dorothy Chen from Elder Protection Services sat in the front row. And even Mrs. Henderson had made the trip, claiming she wanted to see Washington and ask about federal raccoon control policies. "Senator, the key wasn't outsmarting anyone," I began. "It was recognizing that criminals like Tyler succeed because they exploit our natural tendency to trust family, to be polite, and to assume good intentions. They count on us being too embarrassed to ask hard questions." I spent the next hour detailing Tyler's methods, the warning signs I'd learned to identify, and the systematic approach I now use to help other families. The senators asked thoughtful questions about prevention strategies, the role of technology in both facilitating and preventing elder fraud, and the psychological techniques predators use to manipulate their victims. "The paint bomb was creative," Senator Walsh noted, "but what you're describing sounds more like a comprehensive educational approach." Exactly. The paint bomb caught Tyler, but education prevents the next Tyler from finding victims. Every family I work with now knows what questions to ask, what warning signs to watch for, and most importantly, that it's okay to be suspicious of someone who's trying too hard to be helpful. After my testimony, I was approached by representatives from AARP, the National Center on Elder Abuse, and 3 different universities interested in developing training programs based on my methods. "Mr. Harrison," said Dr. Patricia Williams from the University of Iowa's Social Work Department, "we'd like to offer you an adjunct position developing curriculum for our elder protection program. Your combination of educational background and real-world experience is exactly what we need." That evening, in my hotel room overlooking the Capitol, I called Jennifer to share the day's developments. "Dad, you're becoming famous," she laughed. "Next thing you know, they'll want to make a movie about the paint bomb principle." "I hope not. This isn't about me being a hero. It's about making sure what happened to us doesn't happen to other families." "But you are a hero, Dad. Maybe not the cape-wearing kind, but you took something terrible and turned it into a way to protect people. That's heroic." The next morning, as I flew back to Cedar Falls, I reflected on the journey from that terrible night when Tyler triggered my trap to this moment, returning home from testifying before Congress. Tyler had seen me as an easy target, a lonely old man with outdated security habits and too much trust. Instead, he'd awakened something I didn't know I still had, the teacher's instinct to protect students from those who would take advantage of them. Only now, my classroom was the entire state of Iowa, and my students were seniors who deserved to live with dignity and security. The plane descended through winter clouds toward the Cedar Falls Airport, where Jennifer would be waiting to drive me home to our quiet house on Maple Street, where Mrs. Henderson would probably be waiting with questions about federal raccoon policy, and where my next case file would be sitting on the kitchen table. Tyler had tried to make me a victim. Instead, he'd made me a guardian. Spring arrived in Cedar Falls with the kind of gentle warmth that made me remember why Margaret and I had chosen to raise our family here. I was working in my garden, planting the tomatoes that had been a tradition for 40 years, when Jennifer came outside with 2 glasses of iced tea and news that made me smile. "I got the promotion," she announced, settling into the lawn chair beside my vegetable patch. "Cedar Falls Social Services is creating a new position, Director of Elder Protection Programs. They want me to coordinate with your consulting work and develop county-wide prevention initiatives." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." I accepted the iced tea gratefully, my hands still dirty from planting. Mother and daughter, protecting Iowa's seniors together. It feels right, doesn't it? Like we found our purpose through the worst thing that ever happened to us.
I looked across my backyard, noting the changes that had occurred over the past year. The motion sensor light I'd installed after Tyler's break-in attempt, the new security camera system that had become a neighborhood talking point, the garden shed that Mrs. Henderson had insisted on helping me reinforce against what she called criminal wildlife. "Speaking of Mrs. Henderson," Jennifer said, following my gaze, "she wants to know if you'll help her install a paint bomb system in her bird feeder." "I've created a monster." "You've created a community of people who refuse to be victims," Jennifer corrected. "There's a difference." My phone buzzed with a text message. Another family requesting a consultation, this time in Dubuque. A widow whose new boyfriend was asking too many questions about her late husband's life insurance policy. The pattern was becoming depressingly familiar, but each case I prevented felt like a small victory against people like Tyler. "How many families have you helped now?" Jennifer asked. 43 confirmed cases where we prevented fraud. Probably twice that many who attended workshops and learned to recognize warning signs before they became victims. I paused, considering the numbers. The FBI estimates we've prevented over $3 million in losses to Iowa seniors alone. And Tyler? Sentenced to 12 years federal prison. His cousin got 8. The other members of their ring received sentences ranging from 5 to 10 years. I took a sip of iced tea. "Detective Morrison says Tyler's been trying to write letters to you from prison." Jennifer's expression hardened. "I hope you told him those letters go straight to the trash." "Actually, I told him to forward them to my lawyer. Evidence of continued harassment might be useful if Tyler ever gets parole." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon shadows lengthen across my garden. A year ago, this same backyard had been the scene of Tyler's midnight phone calls, his plotting and scheming. Now it was simply a peaceful place where a father and daughter could plan their shared mission to protect other families. "I have something to tell you," Jennifer said eventually. "I've been thinking about dating again." I looked at her carefully. "How do you feel about that?" "Terrified," she admitted, "but also ready. The difference is, now I know what questions to ask. I know what warning signs to watch for. Tyler taught me some very expensive lessons about trust and verification." "Anyone in particular?" "Maybe. David Chen from the library. Dorothy's nephew, the one who moved here from Des Moines to take over the children's program." I knew David. Quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who spent his Saturdays reading stories to kindergartners and helping elderly patrons navigate the computer system. More importantly, he was Dorothy Chen's nephew, which meant he'd been thoroughly vetted by one of the most cautious social workers in Iowa. He seems like a good man. He is, and the best part? He already knows our whole story. Dorothy told him about Tyler, about the paint bomb, about everything we've been through. He's not trying to rescue me or fix me. He just likes spending time with me. I reached over and squeezed my daughter's hand. "Your mother would approve." "I think so too." As the sun set over Cedar Falls, painting the sky in shades of orange that reminded me of Tyler's paint-stained face, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. Not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose, family, and the knowledge that we'd taken our worst experience and transformed it into something that protected others. Tyler had seen us as easy targets. Instead, he'd found his match in an old principal who refused to be underestimated and a daughter who discovered strength she never knew she possessed. 1 year later, I stood in the same bedroom where Tyler had triggered my paint bomb, but everything had changed. The orange stains were long gone, replaced by fresh paint and new furniture. More importantly, the sense of violation that had once filled this space had been transformed into something else entirely: purpose. My phone rang with another consultation request, this time from Oregon. Word about the Cedar Falls method had spread across the country, and families from coast to coast were reaching out for help protecting their elderly relatives from predators like Tyler. "Dad, you've got a visitor," Jennifer called from downstairs. I found Detective Morrison in my living room, holding a thick folder and wearing the expression of someone with important news. "Jim, I wanted to deliver this personally," he said, handing me the folder. "Tyler's parole hearing was denied. He'll serve his full 12-year sentence." I opened the folder to find letters, Dozens of them, from families whose lives had been saved by the techniques we developed after Tyler's failed robbery attempt. Each letter represented a senior citizen who hadn't lost their life savings, a family that hadn't been torn apart by financial fraud, a predator who'd been caught before they could cause lasting damage. "There's something else," Detective Morrison continued. "The FBI wants to establish a national training center based on your methods. They're calling it the Harrison Institute for Elder Protection." Jennifer appeared in the doorway, her face glowing with pride. "Dad, you're going to have an institute named after you?" I thought about Margaret, about how proud she would have been to see our daughter thriving in her new role, to know that our worst nightmare had become the foundation for protecting thousands of other families. "It's not about me," I said finally. "It's about making sure that what Tyler tried to do to us never succeeds anywhere else." That evening, Jennifer and I sat on my front porch, watching the sunset paint Cedar Falls in shades of gold and amber. Mrs. Henderson walked by with her dog, waving cheerfully. She'd successfully defended her bird feeder against raccoons using a modified version of my paint bomb technique, and had become something of a local celebrity in the process. "Do you ever think about Tyler?" Jennifer asked. "Sometimes. Mostly I wonder if prison taught him anything about the harm he caused, or if he's just planning his next con. Does it matter?" I considered her question. No, I suppose it doesn't. What matters is that we took something terrible and turned it into something that helps people. We didn't let him win. Jennifer leaned against my shoulder, the way she had when she was little and we'd watch the stars come out over our quiet neighborhood. "I'm proud of us, Dad. We survived, we healed, and we're making a difference." As darkness settled over Cedar Falls, I reflected on the journey from that terrible night when Tyler's face turned orange with paint to this peaceful evening, surrounded by the evidence of lives rebuilt and purposes discovered. Tyler had seen me as an easy target, a lonely widower with outdated security habits and too much trust. He'd planned to exploit my kindness, steal my savings, and disappear with my daughter into his world of debt and deception. Instead, he'd awakened something I didn't know I still possessed, the educator's instinct to protect students from those who would harm them. Only now, my classroom extended across the entire country, and my lesson plan focused on teaching seniors that being careful doesn't mean being afraid, and that wisdom earned through experience is the best defense against those who underestimate it. The house that had once felt violated and unsafe had become the headquarters for a mission that protected thousands of families. The bedroom where Tyler had been caught red-handed, or rather orange-handed, had become my office, where I reviewed cases and developed new techniques for catching predators. Sometimes justice comes from courtrooms and prison sentences. Sometimes it comes from turning your worst experience into your greatest purpose. Today, as I write this story, the Harrison Institute for Elder Protection has helped train law enforcement officers in 47 states. Jennifer leads the Cedar Falls Elder Protection Program, and together we've prevented over $15 million in fraud losses to seniors across America. Mrs. Henderson has become our unofficial mascot, demonstrating paint bomb techniques at community workshops while regaling audiences with tales of her victories over neighborhood raccoons. The house on Maple Street remains our family home, but it's also become a symbol of something larger. The idea that being underestimated can be your greatest advantage, and that the worst things that happen to us can become the foundation for our most important work. 3 months ago, I received a letter that brought everything full circle. It was from Tyler, writing from federal prison, asking for my forgiveness. He claimed to have found religion, to understand the harm he'd caused, to want to make amends. Jennifer wanted to throw the letter away immediately, but I kept it. Not because I forgave Tyler. Forgiveness is a process that takes time, but because it reminded me of something important. Predators like Tyler succeed because they count on our politeness, our trust, and our reluctance to ask hard questions. They exploit the very qualities that make us good people. The letter also reminded me that Tyler's crime had an unintended consequence he never could have predicted. By trying to victimize one retired principal in Cedar Falls, Iowa, he'd awakened a network of protection that now spans the entire country. His breed had created its own antidote.
Jennifer is engaged now to David Chen, the librarian who won her heart by reading stories to children and treating her father with genuine respect rather than calculated charm. Their wedding is planned for next spring, and I'll walk my daughter down the aisle knowing that she's chosen someone who sees her strength rather than her vulnerability. As for me, I've learned that retirement doesn't mean the end of purpose. Sometimes it means the beginning of your most important chapter. Every family I help protect, every predator we catch before they can cause harm, every senior citizen who learns to trust their instincts instead of dismissing them as paranoia represents a victory not just over Tyler, but over everyone who thinks that age equals weakness. The paint bomb that caught Tyler has become a symbol of something larger, the idea that wisdom, experience, and a little creative thinking can triumph over youth, desperation, and criminal intent. Sometimes the old dog really does know a few tricks the young pups never learned. In the end, Tyler taught us the most valuable lesson of all, that our greatest strength often lies in being underestimated, and that the worst experiences of our lives can become the foundation for our most meaningful work. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through Cedar Falls.
If this story of family resilience, second chances, and the triumph of wisdom over deception touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you'd like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear Jim's message today. Your comments mean everything to our community. Have you ever had to outsmart someone who underestimated you? Please share your thoughts below. And if you want more stories that celebrate the strength, intelligence, and determination of America's older generation, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. We share meaningful tales every week that prove age is just a number and wisdom never goes out of style. Until next time, remember, never let anyone convince you that your best days are behind you. Sometimes they're just beginning.